All right, how's it going? Today I want to talk about script execution order as well as the defer attribute for external scripts. I got Webflow open here, and we're going to go through a couple of examples of how when you go to a website, the browser loads everything, your HTML, your CSS, any scripts that you write. I got a question when I was working with Corey the other day. He said, sometimes I don't know where to put my script. And in general, the short answer is if you put it before the closing body tag, you'll probably be okay. But there's ways you can use the defer attribute or understand JavaScript events to leverage power of the browser and make your code run faster or load faster, I guess I should say. Anyways, so if you watched yesterday, I released a video where we have just a little script. And what this script does is it looks at the score element on the page, so 95, 75, 22, whatever, and it applies a certain color between red and green to that. So we're going to be playing with this script right here. You don't actually have to know what the script is doing, but just want to give you a short little demo on that. So let's save, and now I'm not going to publish or anything. Everything's just as is, and I want to show you when we open the page, and oh, I'm too late, but I want to open Inspector here, and I'll zoom in. I think I'm zoomed in actually quite enough, and I'm going to close this one down. But notice I have Disable Caching up here selected, and so this is just so that it's going to reload everything like it was visiting the page for the first time, and the images aren't stored in my browser cache or anything like that. And I've got a filter of all so that we see everything that gets requested when I request this website. So I want to go to scriptexecutionorder.webflow.io, which is what's up in the URL, but I know you can't see that because I got it cropped off here in the stream. But anyways, I'll refresh, and you can see, okay, now the browser is starting to load stuff. And in Chrome DevTools, if you're not familiar, I'm in the Network tab. We've got our waterfall over here, and this is showing how things are loading, and it's sorted by default by what comes in first, and oh, I don't want that, and then what comes in last at the end. So you can see the very first thing we're getting is this script execution order.webflow.io, and it's type document, and it's 4.2 kilobytes. Anyways, if I click on this to have a look, we can look at the headers. I'm not going to go into this right now, but if we look at the preview, this is just like the bare bones text and links, the HTML of my site, the raw unstyled HTML. If we look at the response might look a little more familiar. Now let's see if I open this up quite a bit. If your response looks a little bit funny, you might want to click this thing here like mine does, so that now we're seeing the whole DOM or document object model, and we can see that very first thing we get is HTML, and this doc type, this is telling our browser that this is an HTML document, and we have our head tag here. There's a bunch of stuff that's going in the head. You can see we have a script tag in here. We have some links, and we'll get into that. And then we have we have another script. Actually, so I did publish. You know what I should do is I should publish because I was working on this. So let's publish and reload. And that script should move to the before closing body tag. Sorry about that. So we'll open that up again. I'll click this little beautify button. And now we can see that script is no longer in the head, but that style tag is there to set rating text equal to visible. And then we look at the body, and now we're starting to get into all of the stuff that we see in Navigator in Webflow. So we've got our div, our section, padding global, container, and so what's happening is the browser is going through all this one by one and essentially parsing your DOM, you'll hear people say. And at the very end of this, I have my script that is going to set the color to the background of these elements based on the score. And now what do I want to do is I want to look at some of the other things in the network request here. So I have the next one that gets loaded is the style sheet. And this is all of our styles that, if you're in Webflow, as you're building on the right side in the styles panel over here, all of these are going into a CSS file that is then being rendered on the DOM. So we've got all of our different CSS classes in here, and those are loading. And then we get our fonts, and we get jQuery, and we get some Webflow JavaScript as well. So what's going on here, if you've ever loaded a website and you see like Arial or kind of a default font before your actual font loads, is that the DOM needs to load that. So that's why you're seeing the flash of unstyled content. And then you can also tell I'm just loading Google Fonts via Webflow right here. They have Google Fonts available here. I'm not actually downloading it into the page like you can do to actually speed up your font execution. And then finally, we get 3 images. These are these images here and the favicon. And something you'll notice, there's this blue bar right here, if you can see it, and this blue text, it says DOM content loaded. It took 1.22 seconds to be DOM content loaded. And this is an event that the browser fires that says, hey, I've loaded all of your content, all your divs, all your images, all your links, all your videos, or whatever. So I'm going to fire this event, and you might want to run some JavaScript now. And we can target that later. I don't know what this is that failed. It says it failed to get the favicon, but we can see it was successful up here. Anyways, let's get into that script execution order that I'm talking about. So if I come into Webflow here and back to the project, and so I have this script in the before closing body tag, this is a great place to put JavaScript because we know that right before the closing body tag, which if I come back here, oh look, actually the favicon did fail because it's not up there. Anyways, who cares? If we come to our response, or you could get the same thing in the elements tab here, so I'll just go there. We have our head and we have our body, and we want our scripts coming in right before the closing body tag because our scripts are accessing, are trying to access elements on our page and do JavaScript on them. We want to do some JavaScript. We want to write some code that does stuff, enhances the functionality, or makes something fun happen on our page, right? So we have this data attribute there, and we want to select it. Now, if I just took this script and cut it and put it inside the head tag and paste it and save, now we have to publish. I'm breaking the site on purpose. Hopefully it breaks in the way I expect it to break, right? So now I'm going to refresh. Oh, we got our favicon this time. You can see it up there. And now I open up the head tag, and you can see my script is loading right here at the very end of the head tag. But I don't have any score divs or score blocks over here because there's nothing for our code to access. And I can highlight that by moving these around first and then coming into our code. And so these score elements, they don't exist yet. There's nothing, you can't run any JavaScript on them. So what's going on is JavaScript is trying to get these things, but they're returning undefined or null or just nothing to this score elements. And then our code loops through them, but we're looping through nothing. So let's console.log, and then in curly brackets, just so it's easier to read, score elements. Score elements. Coding naked here. Coding naked is the best. I will save that and publish. And if I refresh here, now we can see we're logging out score elements, but there's 0 elements in there, so it's nothing. There's nothing to loop over. Something we can do now, remember that DOMContentLoaded event? Let's actually go over to the documentation, the MDM web docs, and see what the DOMContentLoaded event is. So this event fires when the HTML document has been completely parsed and all deferred scripts have downloaded and executed. It doesn't wait for other things like images, subframes, and async scripts to finish loading. I may have said that we're going to wait for our images to load, but this is important to know that the images don't finish loading. So if your script actually does stuff with images, then you may need to wait for an even later event, which if we look back at the network tab, there's this red line, and that's just the loaded event. I don't think I can scroll this. Let's see if I open it. So DOM content loaded happened in 907 milliseconds, and load happened in 1.3 seconds. And if we wait for the load event, then we should be able to get our images. But we could confirm that within the documentation here. A different event load should be used to detect a fully loaded page. It's a common mistake to use load where DOM content loaded would be more appropriate. Anyways, so make sure to read about this stuff. The documentation is the key. Okay, now let's go back. I want to show you how we can keep this code inside of our head tag and have it work. So we want to wait for that DOM content loaded event to fire, right? Because we need to make sure that these score elements exist. So what I'm going to say is document.add event listener. And this is going to take a first parameter of the name of the event, which we know is DOM content loaded. Hey, check in the chat. We got Kevin in here. We got Kudzi, and we got Aaron. Thanks, guys, for showing up. Appreciate that. If you have any questions about script order execution, feel free to let me know. I would love to take some questions. All right, so we've got an event listener for the DOM content loaded event. I'm going to put a comma here, and the second parameter is going to be a function that we want to run. Omkar, how are you doing? And I'm going to say that this function gets a name of init, and now I have to define it. So function init. You guys came to see me code naked, huh? Didn't you? All right, so I've got this function init. I know that this is going to execute when the DOMContentLoaded event fires. So all I got to do is come here and cut that and paste. And I put a tab. Let's tab the rest of this over just to be fancy about it, and save. And now I'm going to publish. Aaron, he's flexing on us. Okay, so that's published. I'm going to refresh. And now look at this. Score elements is a node list with 3 elements inside of it, and we're getting them to show up on the page. So it doesn't matter where we put the code as long as we know when our code executes and we're defining the event that we're listening for. Now, you really don't even need that DOMContentLoaded event to fire, but a lot of times it can be useful to just wrap your code around that to make sure that whatever you're waiting for to be on the page is actually on the page and has been parsed by the browser before we start doing some JavaScript with it. The next thing I want to talk about is this defer attribute. If you guys are using any FinSuite stuff, let's say FinSuite attributes, you'll notice a lot of times, I think filter uses the async attribute. Yeah, they're using async here. Let's see CMS load, async. He's using async on all of these. Yeah. Where's my defer attribute? Defer. Okay, this one's got defer. This is their copy to clipboard. So you can only use defer and async on your external scripts. What's up, Heather? In a work meeting, which has now been demoted to my secondary desktop. That's right. We're learning about Virtual Boy games. And Kudzi says, I also use DOMContentLoaded so that variable names in my scripts don't clash. Good idea. Yeah, so in that, you're defining a separate scope. Cool. So we see the defer attribute here. And then the other place I wanted to look was, let's go to GSAP. GSAP installation. You guys know I love GSAP. So on their installation guide here, they don't even give us, they just say, chuck this in the before closing body tag. But we can improve the loading of GSAP using the defer attribute. How do I want to describe this? Let's go back to our code example. Actually, let's go to the documentation. And right here, I'm looking at the documentation on the script element. And down here in attribute, they give us a summary of async as well as defer. This Boolean attribute is set to indicate to a browser that the script is meant to be executed after the document has been parsed, but before firing DOMContentLoaded. So right before DOMContentLoaded fires, it's going to execute our scripts. But if we put defer, it will actually start downloading as soon as we start parsing the DOM. So that's kind of what's key to know here. And then the other thing to know is this attribute must not be used if the source attribute is absent. So for inline scripts, which is what we have right now. So I come back here. So what that's saying is I can't just say script defer. I can't do this. And then get rid of my wrapper function. Like if I tried to do this, still not going to work. Let's see if we get an error in our console or anything. I don't think we will, though. What do you think? Okay, we see it's not working. We don't get any errors that we can't use that defer attribute inside of an inline script. But what we have to do is, let's say we want to load this externally. So I would just cut this, and I'll get rid of this script tag. And if you know me, you know that I've used Code Sandbox. We can delete this. So we've got our Code Sandbox file, and we're just going to paste. It's the same code. And now Code Sandbox is serving our files at this URL. So we'll copy that, and we'll open up a script tag and say the source equals this /index.js, closing dog ear, opening dog ear, close our script tag. And now we're going to say defer. We want to defer this script. And notice there was like something here from Webflow. Adding external script tags to the of your project can slow down page loads. We need some proofreading here, Webflow. Consider adding async or defer attribute in the script tag for the following files to improve performance. Sweet. And then they link us to the documentation. I like that. Anyways, we're going to add defer to get rid of that warning and save and publish. And hopefully this works. All right, back on the website, refresh. It works. We've got our elements showing up here. We have them logged out to console, and there's 3 of them, not 0 of them. And now let's have a look and see where in the network tab our script actually executes. So we can see here we have index.js, right? So it's loading after we get the HTML, we get the CSS, we get our fonts and jQuery and all that, all that BS. And then we've got our index.js here, which is just the code that we wrote in Code Sandbox. And if we look at our Elements tab, we can see, yep, the script is right here, and it's indeed coming after all of this junk that Webflow puts in here automatically for us. All right. So we've learned about where we can put scripts, and we've learned about this defer attribute. Is there anything else that I want to cover? I think that's really it. You know, something else to understand is what executes when. So something we can do is we could come here and we could say, let's make a new inline script and just console.log. This is page head and /script. And we're going to just, so that's the page head. This is page /body. Save those. And then we've also got these global script places. FinSuite extension here, open the custom code. And in the global head, we'll put that. And in the, this is global head. And in the footer, we'll put this is global closing body. And I'll save that. And I'll save that. And this is just the exact same place as going to project settings. And if you come over to custom code, it's the exact same thing that we're doing here. All right, but let's go back to designer. And we're going to make it pop for like 30 seconds, but that gives me a excuse to look at the chat. Nobody's chatting, nobody's asking questions. They just popped in to say hello. We appreciate that. Let's go ahead and publish. And let's see what order these console log statements come out in. So we get global head, global closing body, and then page closing body. This is another important thing to know. I don't often put, no, actually I do. These all have different kind of uses. You'll notice like Google Tag Manager is going to want you to put their script in the global head of your code. And they're going to use the async attribute because they want it to load concurrently with the rest of your page. And it probably doesn't depend, like the JavaScript in that code doesn't depend on objects on the page being loaded for it to execute properly. And then we have our page head. We just saw how we can put stuff with the defer attribute. Oh, that reminds me of what I want to do. So if we come to GreenSock and we copy this, say we want to do some GSAP stuff, and we come to our code. So you'll see a lot of people put GSAP in right here. Let's save that and publish and refresh. And okay, where's GSAP? Where's GSAP? We can see GSAP is right here, and it doesn't start until, let's see, it doesn't start until the whole page has finished parsing, right? Because, let's see if this tells us anything good. Mostly it's waiting for a response from server and content download, so it took 35 milliseconds to download. But it doesn't start until we've finished this execution of the document, right? So let's try to move it up and add the defer attribute on there and see what happens. Take our GSAP library, move it up here. Let's defer it. And just to make sure that it's actually loading, let's do console.log. We'll just log the GSAP object and see if we can get it in there. I'm curious to see what's going to happen because we have an inline script in the closing body and we have a deferred, because we know defer is going to wait until just before DOMContentLoaded fires. But when does the inline script execute? GSAP is not defined. Okay, That's good to know. However, let's take a look. We have GSAP here, and we can see that it gets queued while our document is parsing or while our document is downloading. And as soon as our document finishes downloading, then it gets to go. And I don't remember what the time was from before, but remember we have disabled caching, so these could very well change between request to request. But this is a way you might be able to, if you have a lot of stuff on your page, a lot of external libraries, is to defer them. Now, we also need them to work. So what we can do is we can tell our just little script here to wait until the DOMContentLoaded event fires. Because like I said, we know this is going to happen. This is going to execute right before that event. So let's just verify that it works. Document.add event listener DOMContentLoaded. And I'll just define an anonymous function here, just like that. And we'll take this console log statement and move it in here and save and publish. I'm about to wrap things up, everybody, so if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat. Let's refresh. And look, now we have access to the GSAP object because we told it to wait until that event fired. And if I open that and I look at GSAP, we have all the, from to, all that stuff you're familiar seeing me talk about on my other videos. Cool. Let's see, checking out the chat. Kudzi says, if you defer it, then won't it try to log GSAP before it's done? Oh, never mind. Yeah, you saw me get that wrong, right? So we had to wait for DOMContentLoaded. And then Aaron says, gotta run. Love these live streams. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate the support. And look forward to our next one together. All right, everybody. This concludes the stream. Thank you for watching. I get a lot of questions about what the defer attribute is and where to put scripts in your Webflow project. Hopefully that teaches you a little bit about when you visit a URL, what's going on, and how to troubleshoot if maybe your code is executing at a different time than you think. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.